my son. Think I ain't spoke to my son. Think I ain't told my son, his mama, and his grandmamas. His ass going to prison. If you goddamn keep it up, his ass going to prison.
The cameras flash. The courtroom falls silent. And in that moment, one of hip-hop's most respected fathers watches his world crumble as his 19-year-old son receives a sentence that will change everything. This is the story of how King Harris, son of rap legend T.Y., went from social media stardom to facing 5 years behind bars, and how it broke his father in ways the public has never seen before. What you're about to discover will shock you. Clifford Joseph Harris Jr., better known to the world as T.I., built an empire on the foundation of transformation. The King of the South, as he's known, rose from the streets of Atlanta to become one of hip-hop's most influential voices, selling over 10 million albums worldwide and establishing himself as both a successful entrepreneur and a devoted family man. His journey from hustler to mogul became the blueprint for countless artists who followed in his footsteps. T.I.'s relationship with his children, particularly his eldest son King Harris, born Messiah Ya Majesty Harris, has always been under intense public scrutiny. The world watched as King grew up in the spotlight, appearing on his family's VH1 reality show, T.I. and Tiny, The Family Hustle, from a young age. What seemed like a privileged upbringing in one of Atlanta's most successful households slowly revealed cracks that would eventually lead to this devastating moment. King Harris wasn't just T.Y.'s son, he was meant to be his legacy. From childhood, King showed the same charisma and street-smart attitude that made his father a legend. T.I. often spoke proudly about molding his son, teaching him the lessons he'd learned the hard way. But sometimes, the very streets that make you can also break the ones you love most. The Harris household represented something powerful in hip-hop culture. Here was a man who'd faced his own legal troubles, served federal prison time, and emerged stronger, determined to provide his children with opportunities he never had. T.I.'s transformation from convicted felon to respected businessman and activist seemed to prove that change was possible. His children were supposed to be living proof that the cycle could be broken. But King Harris had other plans. As he entered his teenage years, the young man began showing signs of rebellion that went far beyond typical adolescent defiance. Social media became his platform, and what started as innocent posts gradually evolved into something more troubling. Videos surfaced of King engaging in behavior that reminded many of his father's darker past, the very past T.I. had worked so hard to overcome. The warning signs were there, but perhaps T.I. was too close to see them clearly. The turning point came on a humid Atlanta night in September. King Harris, now 19 and believing himself untouchable due to his family's status, made a decision that would haunt him forever. What began as a routine traffic stop escalated into something far more serious when officers discovered substances in the vehicle King was driving. But this wasn't just a simple possession charge. The truth was far more devastating. King wasn't just using, he was distributing. The young man who had everything handed to him on a silver platter had chosen to walk the same destructive path his father had once traveled. But unlike T.Y.'s era, where street credibility could translate into rap success, King's choices led him directly into the unforgiving arms of a legal system that had grown tired of celebrity privilege.
Yes, sir. There's one here. Does your buddy have one as well? All right, just hang tight right here for me. Let me clear this. I don't want any accidental fires.
There's no safety. You gotta take.
There's no safety.
Okay.
Well, I'm not gonna mess around with that too much.
Arrest sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community. Here was the son of a man who dedicated years to mentoring young people, speaking at schools, and advocating for criminal justice reform. T.I. had used his platform to warn kids about the consequences of street life, sharing his own experiences as cautionary tales. Now his own son had become the very example he'd been trying to prevent others from becoming. During the investigation, more details emerged that painted an even darker picture. King Harris had been involved in activities that went beyond simple drug possession. Text messages revealed a network of young dealers, many connected to Atlanta's music scene, with King serving as a key figure. The prosecution argued that he'd used his father's name and connections to build credibility in circles where such credibility could be deadly. T.I.'s response was immediate but complex. Publicly, he stood by his son, hiring the best legal representation money could buy. Privately, according to sources close to the family, he was devastated. Friends described a man who felt he'd failed not just as a father, but as the role model he'd worked so hard to become. The case dragged on for months, with each court appearance bringing new revelations. King Harris, once confident and defiant, began to show signs of the weight bearing down on him. His social media presence, once filled with bravado and expensive lifestyle posts, became sporadic and subdued. The reality of potentially spending his early 20s in prison was finally sinking in. Then came the day that changed everything. The courtroom was packed as Judge Patricia Williams prepared to deliver King Harris's sentence. T.I. sat in the front row with family members. King stood before the bench, no longer confident but a frightened teenager finally understanding consequences. Judge Williams acknowledged King's age and family pleas for mercy. But she emphasized the seriousness of his crimes and need for accountability, especially given his privileged background. 5 years, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. The sentence hit like a physical blow. T.I.'s composure finally cracked. Witnesses saw one of hip-hop's strongest figures break down as reality set in. His 19-year-old son would spend his early 20s behind bars. King Harris was led away in handcuffs, turning back once to look at his family. That image became seared into everyone's memory. It was the moment T.I.'s greatest success collided with what felt like his greatest failure. The aftermath of King Harris's sentencing reverberated beyond the Harris family. T.I., who'd advocated for criminal justice reform, now faced the personal reality of a system he'd criticized. The man who'd argued for rehabilitation over punishment watched his son disappear into the very system he'd fought to change. I spoke with raw honesty about his pain and failures. He admitted his success perhaps shielded his children from real consequences, creating false invincibility that led to King's downfall. King Harris's story reminds us that talent, money, and good intentions aren't always enough to break generational cycles. Sometimes the streets call louder than wisdom, and consequences are real regardless of who your father is. T.I.'s transformation was supposed to pave a different path for his children. Instead, it became a painful lesson in how history repeats itself. And in that pain lies the most powerful message. Change is possible, but it must be chosen and earned by each generation for itself. Drop one word in the comments that captures how this story makes you feel. Subscribe for more deep dives into the untold stories behind hip-hop's biggest names, and check the description for our sources and additional context on this developing story.